Right, let's get started with this live stream of Smart AI, where we have tons of things to discuss, and theme has always been to present these information in a condensed manner, in a compact manner, so that way, as you're unfolding, you're starting to unfold from the proper platform, proper point of implementation. So if you have a lot of these questions that comes up as you go through this presentation, take notes on those and start asking those questions on the notes, because what you will see is that these sort of experiences that all the subject matter experts who's been in this AI machine learning space for a very long time, one of the things that they're able to specialize on is to save you a lot of time by telling you what will work and what will not work. And asking those questions creates the impression of the mindsets that you do have. Because if you have some gap in understanding, so there's a knowledge gap, these questions helps to fill those gaps really quickly. So that way, it's not just better, faster, and cheaper, but it's more self-satisfying and least amount of frustration. What comes with your ability to engage with your data and engage with your business process and put this business process and data together to make a good return on investment, it can be frustrating. And then that has been the case for a very long time, not just in, say, government space or unfamiliar space where people are not necessarily very technical. This is an experience from the Silicon Valley, because of this knowledge gap analysis wasn't the priority. It was a deliverable that was a priority. And nowadays we see these lots of these fast moving product deliverables that are AI machine learning based. They have been sharpened for a very long time. It's 2025, even 50 some years, right? They went through these understanding of what it is that they know and what is it that they don't know, and how it is that they are able to create an ecosystem of people. So these people are able to drive a process to develop and deliver these AI technology or machine learning technologies. So lots to talk about, lots to unfold. But as you're listening to this, do take some notes. And as you take those notes, think of the ways that your team and people within your office culture or your organizational culture will give you the feedback for this information, right? If they don't know, are they willing to ask those questions? If they know how to ask those questions, are they asking it with confidence, or are they sort of asking just to avoid the conversation? There's lots of these need for your knowledge gap analysis, but your full team knowledge gap analysis is what's going to save you lots of these times in AI machine learning implementation and the feedback loop of it. And which we will talk about feedback loop in coming events, but this is a first day conversation sort of. So let's keep it at known and known unknowns and unknown unknowns, right? The feedback loop comes at the end, where we have to realize that some of these unknown unknowns does rely heavily on our feedback loop. As you are exploring these topics of AI machine learning, um, what we are able to uh, experience with our time, say for example, 2 hours, 3 hours, or 4 hours, or how much time you spend, it's always uh, uh, years and years worth of experience actually, right? But because of these condensed sort of knowledge sharing events, what you're able to see is that what took somebody 10 years ago, 10 years today, probably will take a few months, right? But just because you're learning these things in very fast pace does not should not bring your confidence to a level to say, yeah, I'm learning too fast. Maybe this is not the right information. I can almost guarantee you that these informations that you're learning, I wish I learned it in a fast pace. So that way I could have done more. So what you will end up actually is with the right information in a very fast pace. And as you do, you will be able to take action on things that will actually uh, will add time and add cost to your journey, right? But it will be shrunk in cost and shrunk time spent on that journey. So as you are working through your ML ops, AI ops, LLM ops, whichever the work that you're trying to deliver on, that delivery it has to be shrunk to a point that it has to be shrunk so that way you are able to be competitive with other products that are being delivered with AI machine learning. So let's say, for example, what took about 6 years previously might take you a year. That shouldn't make you feel like, oh, well, something's wrong with my system. No, it's just that you are far able to handle hardware and far more knowledgeable about the software, and you're able to do data acquisition in a fast, swift manner because of the accessibility that has improved over the last 10 years. So even if it takes less time, does not separates you from your inability to do version 1, version 2, version 3 iterations, right? Because even if it takes you less time to deliver, does not mean that you have nothing else to deliver after. It's a continuous process in AI machine learning to deliver, deliver, deliver. You always have to deliver. You always have to continuously improve, continuously integrate, continuously explore, like we do with DevOps. But in the MLOps space, that's always the case, is that in DevOps space, if you have something that is not continuously integrated, continuously developed, the user satisfaction goes down, but the performance of the tool doesn't go down, right? Performance of these tools is as good as the first day was developed, first day was delivered. But with MLOps, it's sort of the opposite. Once you deliver the poor quality, and then MLOps over time improves that quality, and that quality only improves as more time and more training is conducted, more feedback, more monitoring is conducted. And if it doesn't improve over time, that's when you have the problem that you have delivered something that doesn't have a learning capability and doesn't necessarily have the ability to intake new information. So that's what I want to talk more about, is that if you have these people, process, and technology mindset from DevOps days, or we still do DevOps, but as you're moving into the MLOps space, you have to think about the DevOps as your backbone and build off of that, right? But if you haven't done DevOps, it's not necessarily necessary for you to do DevOps. Most people that we interact with in Smart AI are not necessarily people that does tech work or has done software development or any sort of development that is coding based or software stack based. What MLOps require on top of DevOps and MLOps is that you have to have participants that are beyond tech, right? Non-techies have to be involved in these simulations of ideation, requirement gathering, designing, and of course development. And then once development is done, now they have to be able to audit. Why is that important? It's important because if you have non-techies, let's say, for example, business process owner, data owner, community of practice that are not necessarily coders and programmers or large language model experts, what they have to do is they have to give you those feedback, right? And that feedback loop is a whole conversations that we can have later on. But that's the idea of the Smart AI workshops community, is that in these workshops, you are able to articulate what it is that you know as a domain expert, business process owner, data owner, and then how it is that you need to communicate your requirements through AI machine learning or LLM, large language models or chat GPT related topics, right? Because at this point, you're not so comfortable speaking on these topics, but you just have to be, because that's the world that we're moving into, where communications of ideas and requirements will be the most necessary part of delivering the version 1, version 2, version 3 in a better, faster, cheaper manner, right? Because more time it takes for you to communicate, more problems you're going to have going forward. So let's talk about the known knowns and some of the known unknowns. But known unknown is something that we'll talk about, because based off of what you know, like if you're a domain expert, you might not know all these keywords here, but you can definitely look them up and say, well, I know enough, right? So those known knowns are still your known unknown. And that's okay, because you're not in technological work. You don't work with software and DevOps and MLOps on a daily basis. What you are able to do is just look at this and say, yeah, that makes sense. That should be part of any program, because return on investment, scalability, integration, things like that should be just part of everyday projects that we work on. So why do we have to know more of these? Because that's how condensed it gets, because of the integrations, the interoperability of other topics that is not necessarily listed here will show up as you move into the world of AI machine learning discussions. And as you move into the AI machine learning discussions, you will have to describe why it is that you need the solution, and how it is that it's urgency, or is it something that you can wait for version 3 or version 4 or version 5. So there's many ways to explain it, but the point is, these doesn't have to be all the things that you know. It's just that you probably will have some basic understanding of these topics. So artificial intelligence and machine learning, every time I bring it up, there's somebody in the room that will say, you know what, I know AI because I've heard it on the news. I don't know anything else about AI. And don't even tell me what machine learning is, because this is the first time I heard it. If you heard of machine learning, let me explain machine learning to you one more time, just from my perspective, so that way everybody has a baseline. When we do data analytics and data intelligence, which we have been doing for a very long time, machine learning is just a step beyond that, right? Because we do data analytics and data intelligence, and we've been doing it for decades and decades and decades at this point, machine learning just enables us to do more with it. And if you have machine learning as your core stepping point to the AI, you are on the right track. But if you have a team and that team is not doing machine learning, maybe you need to sit back and think about what it is that you're actually doing, and what it is that you're trying to achieve, and how would you achieve that with machine learning. Another way to explain the same what I just described right now is that if you have a business logic, which every business does, through that business logic, you're able to gather a lot of the intelligence for your business, which is collecting those data. And if you collect those data in a certain structured way, you can do machine learning. And if you can do machine learning by optimizing those machine learning capabilities in a ways that serves the purposes of AI, or augmenting the intelligence, now all of a sudden you have artificial intelligence, or you can claim to have artificial intelligence, or you are utilizing this artificial intelligence like experience to provide your data to the person who's using those data. And of course, we will talk more about those in a Q&A if you have more questions about it. Going forward into these, the next level of user experience, who are these end users, right? Are you the owner of the data? Are you the user of the data? Or are you, there's so many ways to think about data ownership, right? So many ways to say, who are this data, all right? Who's in charge of this data? Who's responsible for it? Who's legally liable for this data? Experiences, the way we have dealt with data so far is changing. It will change even further. Even it will become stringent. But our work experience, the way we do our daily task, will change. By the way, if you're looking at this picture here, you can tell this gentleman has 2 laptops and a keyboard, and none of them are probably in sync. And so this is just a picture that was probably generated by a AI system, because it has no meanings on what he's doing on 2 different laptops with 3 different keyboards. Maybe he is doing something important. Who knows? So look, this known unknowns and unknown unknown is just going to dramatically add more knowledge to your portfolio of things that you know. But things that you're able to communicate with is what the goal of Smart AI community is, right? Because the S stands for specialist, M for methods, A for advocates, and R&T for research and training. So A for advocates, when you are advocating for whatever that is, that the requirement, or just pushing for a good idea to become reality, or just saying, let's do things safely, securely, and privately, or, have privacy in mind, have security in mind, have safety in mind. Whatever it is that you're advocating for, you have to understand these topics from multiple perspectives. Right. So if you're a domain expert, subject matter specialist, you're a leader, you're an executive, or you are somebody who's pushing for a product, you have to understand these topics from the perspective of multiple techies and multiple non-techies, right? Multiple business interests, multiple business process owners, stakeholders, and so on and so forth. So the reason it's important is because they all feed into this your AI machine learning solutions, right? Because AI is not necessarily a technology that you deliver. AI is a process. And the reason it's a process, and going back to that version iteration, version 1, 2, 3, 4, and continuous development, continuous integration, is that these AIs require just that. It's a continuous process that you have to have, not necessarily deliver one time and forget it, right? This is not what we have dealt with for the last 10, 15 years. This is something that has intelligence. This is something that you have to take care of. Instead of saying, we're implementing, you're actually adopting an AI system that you have to grow sort of like a child. So known unknowns, if you look at this list here, and you can pause the video as well, you will see some of those terminologies like NPUs, CPUs, and GPUs. Okay, what is that, right? Like, well, that's what we were going to talk about, right? We're going to talk about why these things makes a difference. But you don't have to necessarily understand every single piece of it. You just have to understand why that matters with the data, right? And let's say, for example, we're talking about edge computing, right? Well, what's edge computing? I don't know anything about it. It will become your known once we're done with describing edge computing to you. But what you'll be able to communicate is that why this NPU, GPUs, and CPUs and edge computing has a lot to do with hardware, but also the software. The software, how it's changing the world, the world of latest software that we have, and this improvement of the software, how that will change the way we do work, how the way we communicate. This will all change. And as it changes, how can we understand NPU, GPU, CPU separately so that way we are able to describe what it is that we need from these hardwares? And especially if you're talking about hardware and software, what it is that we need from the data, right? What sort of data do we need in order to make this reality? Say, for example, your RPAs, right? Your robotic process automation. We've probably had those for decades at this point, but how do we improve our robotic process automation? What happens if we have the LLM and data? What happens to our, I don't know, let's just throw post-quantum in the mix, right? Okay, is post-quantum today, is it here? No, but if it's going to be here 2 years from now, what sort of decisions do I have to make as a stakeholder, the business process owner? So again, moving into that unknown, right? There's lots of these topics that you might not be familiar with and might not be, working on a daily basis because you have previous project that you have onboarded 2, 3 years ago, and those projects are still on continuing, right? So how do you shift your project? So what is things that I specialize on is that instead of taking you to AI, right? I'll bring the AI to you, right? So that way these AIs that you are interacting with on a daily basis, and which you will with AI agents, AI APIs, and large language models that are behaving like AI chatbots. As you interact with them, you have to know the unknowns variable because that comes down to your cybersecurity sanitized practice. That comes down to your business process practice, the best industrial practice. That becomes your GRC issues, right? Your compliance from the government, GDPR rules. If you don't have rules in your industry, and all of a sudden you're dealing with a healthcare topic because these unknown unknowns becomes your reality. Now you have to know how to discuss these topics with much of the comfort of the way you describe your domain. But now you should be able to describe your domain expertise for AI with AI. So the use cases that is available today for us to discuss, it has lots to do with MLOps, right? But we don't know much about MLOps, right? So knowing the use cases that you have, if you have a business impact and that business impact is based on MLOps, let's talk about MLOps. Let's talk about the outsourcing versus in-house operation. Well, we've been very comfortable with outsourcing a lot of our work for a very long time, but nowadays it's coming to the point that you either pick 50-50. It's not 100% ever, right? It has never been 100%, but it cannot be 80-20, right? 80-20 means that 20% of it is the requirement that's being driven from home, and then 20% 80% of it is outsourced, right? That cannot be the case going forward. It becomes more like a 40-60, 50-50 equation where even if you outsource, you still have to have the majority of the ownership because of what I said earlier about it's not implementation, it's an adoption. You have a responsibility to take care of your data, keep it safe, secure, and private. But as you safe, secure, and private that data, how do you grow those data so that way it feeds into your feedback loop? So that way your AI machine learning is expanding over time and is expanding and growing in the right direction for the purposes of your business rather than to say just out of control. Will semiconductor be a part of the conversation? Absolutely, because the way the information, the hardware, software, and data is moving, it's nothing without semiconductor. And the shift with geopolitics and your internal manufacturing within 48 states is all leading to semiconductor chips, and that's going to create a huge difference in your world and your workspace and your workforce. Of course, you're seeing the latest of the hardwares, these hardware capabilities that we are onboarding with many of the organizations, the way we can get things done quickly, fast, communicate fast, and exchange information really, really fast. And what sort of device are we using for this communication purposes? You will see this changes of hardware and changes in software. And of course, that either increases your cost in doing business, your OPEX and CAPEX, or it reduces your CAPEX and OPEX. We'll talk more about those in this community as well. So as you're thinking about it, think about what is known and what is unknown to you, right? Because if it's known to you, you kind of have to look at the blast radius and say, how far out do I have to look in order to understand what it is that I don't know? So there's one challenge that I always use, which is to say, do you have a 5-year vision? If you don't have a 5-year vision, do you at least have a 2-year vision, right? If you have a vision to say, is this where I'm at today as an organization or as a team lead or as part of this team or just as whole team of 10, 15 people that is in a startup, what's our 2-year goal? What's our 5-year goal? Can we reverse engineer from that and to talk about where it is that we want to see AI in the future and where is the AI today and how do we, do an interoperable AI system that is also scalable and sustainable? And how does this work in small pieces, or do we start big and then work our way up to something bigger, right? Because if it's tactical and if it's starting today, how would that be scalable in the future, right? How can you sustain that in the future? Those are some of the questions that we will talk about as well, because you can identify many opportunities, but identifying this opportunity is sometimes to say, like, let's step back a little because we might have moved forward too quickly, right? So this dynamic flexibility of continuous exploration, continuous integration, continuous development means sometimes you actually have to look at where you started and where you have to go back to and start all over again, right? All over doesn't mean necessarily you threw everything away. It's just that you have identified an opportunity, but doesn't mean that's the only opportunity you can identify. You can find other opportunities and create an interoperability between two opportunities and scale that one better than the one that you started with, right? Because the scalability and sustainability is a big part of your ecosystem, and your indicator of success is the one that is scalable and sustainable. So we talk about hardware a lot, and the reason we talk about hardware a lot and the way we do work, the way it changes, is because if you look at a full life cycle of any project that's being delivered, there's an ideation phase, there's a requirement phase, and there is a phase where we are delivering, developing, auditing, and just doing our agile methodologies, pretty much, or waterfall methodologies, whichever methodology you have. The hardware, as it changes, you always have to keep the hardware of the past and the hardware of the future in mind, right? So the world that we're moving into right now, we're talking about reducing the amount of hardware using AR, VR goggles, or even just simply having a single device that can do multiple things, so it reduces the usages of other hardwares that we no longer need. So we can go through hundreds of examples in that fashion, but this is the conversations that we want to have about hardware. But let's talk about these unknown actually, right? So just beyond hardware, each hardware requires electricity, and this electricity is generating from somewhere within your local area or somewhere, where the power is generated, but you're farthest removed from it. But that doesn't necessarily mean that because you add more hardware, all of a sudden your problems are solved, right? Because as you add more hardware, other people are also buying hardware, and that means our uses of power, it goes up dramatically, and that dramatic power consumption means there's other ecosystem problems like water usage and having this power delivered to you in a non-wasteful manner, and having it delivered through a data center. And these data centers require a lot of power consumption. That means that power consumption takes priority over your residential power consumption. So there's all sorts of problems that we can talk about, and that's important that we talk about it, so that way things that we do today enables us to be scalable and sustainable in the future, rather than makes us vulnerable to a sudden disruption or interruption that we couldn't foresee, and we don't have a steps to navigate those circumstances. Like I said, power is generated wherever it's generated. There's a water source behind it, and these water source are being impacted positively and negatively. But we want to make sure that if there's a disruption to the power sources, if there's a disruption to the hardware manufacturing, if there's a disruption to our data processing, we all have to know about these topics one way or another, and we have to enable ourselves for this disruption and how to mitigate around those disruptions. So, sort of what we're talking about with the blast radius. Let's say, for example, and this core of it is the AI and the machine learning and this computer systems and yourself. Out in the blast radius, you just have to know a whole lot about a whole lot of things, but you don't necessarily need to be the expert of everything. You just need to be aware of. You just to be able to articulate and communicate these topics, probably with some confidence, most likely, and clearly, so that way other individuals who are listening, they don't have to be techies, but there are other stakeholders that can agree with you, and using your emotional intelligence, using your ability to communicate very and intellectually, you are able to convey a message and have those messages come back with a full feedback loop where the decision makers are making decision off of your comments. So this AI, the AI world that we are experiencing today, of course, we talk about AI generating a lot of prompts and giving us a lot of answers. But if you think about AI from the perspective of just text, you will come to one conclusion. But these days, you're seeing the text turns into videos. That's great. This text also turns into images. That's great. But what business value does it add, right? And how do we make these AI system that already has lots of the scalability? How do I make this AI a business value proposition that helps me capture value, and enables us to do better and more business, capture bigger market segments, so on and so forth, right? So there's lots of these technologies, as you can see, like some of them, like for text to audio. Yes, everybody uses it, but what business value does it add than the companies who's selling that to me, right? So you really have to do a lot of inner inspection, so that way you are able to say, this is my business process. These are the things that we do today very manually. These doesn't necessarily have to face the customer. Customer will never see it, but it brings our OpEx down and it helps us with better revenue. Nothing changes with the customer segment. Nothing changes with our market segment. It's just that business operation is being conducted with least amount of cost associated with it. So this AI topics becomes very convoluted because we know where to start, but we just don't know where it will end, right? So one of the topics that I want to bring up today in this specific discussion is that when it comes to AI, the best AI use cases is to use AI for coding, and we will talk more about that in future sessions. But if you are not looking into the AI for coding purposes and how AI agents can code for you on your behalf and do it in a sort of like intellectual way, you are in for a big surprise come next year, because AI agents is all the rage right now, and they're going to come in full forces to change the world that we've not yet experienced, and this is going to change the world for good by 2025 and 2026. And of course, I want to quickly walk through these people, technology, and solutions. But as you can tell, the way the world has been with people, process, and technology, it's changing to data, it's changing to people, it's changing into the machine learning as a process, and the use cases are what's being delivered, right? So the world is changing, but changing for good. But there's many ways to describe these topics to you, right? Describe these topics to everybody. Even the techies have difficulties understanding the differences between data and the software, because they don't necessarily always deal with data. They always deal with software, but sometimes some of the techies only deal with hardware. They have lots of this different perspective. But if you can baseline everybody's understanding about what it means to have data, what it means to have data that is structured, what does it mean to have data that is intelligent, how does that change this thing, right? So we really have to get our people up to speed using single formula. And then one of the formulas that I use is this example of pick up and drop off, right? Pick up and drop off is a terminology that is being used in semiconductor chips world. But if you think about pick up and drop off, everything you need to know about data, everything you need to know about software and hardware will just make sense, right? Very easy to understand once you go through a inner inspection of how data works, and how does that we as a human work, and how does that we deliver data, and how does the data deliver intelligence, right? There's just many ways to understand it, but this one specifically works for every single AI use case that you'll have, and it will make you think differently, but it will also help you communicate a lot faster and a lot better. So that's another piece of the smart AI community workshops, is that we always talk about memes, right? You don't necessarily learn everything from the meme, but everything you learn, if you go back into a meme, you start seeing why that piece that you are so confused about is so much more funnier than you think it is, right? And memes are super important in the AI machine learning world. I'm a big fan of it. I use it a lot. I've been collecting memes for the last 5 years about AI machine learning. They're all hilarious. They all teach you something different. So some that you probably will be entertained by as well as you interact with smart AI community on a weekly basis. But the idea behind this community is to talk through all the possibilities that are out there. But let's say all the possibilities are not same for everybody. So when you come to this community, you see multiple perspectives from multiple people. You see the multiple priorities, right? So when we talk about don't miss the forest for the tree, and think about tree as a chat GPT. If somebody has a priority and it all involves around chat GPT, you will hear somebody else's perspective that is farthest from ChatGPT, but yet they're all AI related. They all have some ChatGPT contribution, or ChatGPT is the most core component of what they're looking as far as priority goes. So what we want to do is draw a picture of a forest for you in your mind in a short, minimum possible way, so that way you are able to articulate the full forest while focusing on a single tree, right? While focusing on a single priority that you have, and that priority is interoperable, scalable, and sustainable. So I use some of these terminologies like, other companies, what are they doing, and what are some of the things that they're working on. But even I get into the nitty gritty of things, right? Because there's so much to talk about, but using a single small formula where I can have you feel comfortable and confident about communicating about AI machine learning is the main goal of Smart AI community and all the subject matter expert in the Smart AI community. Because if we are able to have you communicate with confidence, and you're able to communicate and drive those requirements for your organization for a better workforce, a better workforce that has a psychological safe space anywhere they work, be it remote, be in the office, whatever the case is, we all feel comfortable in the next phases of workforce. Because when it comes to the future of workforce, um, we have a shrinking workforce that really needs to be augmented by artificial intelligence. So I call it augmenting intelligence rather than artificial intelligence. But the shrinking workforce that we will deal with in the future, not only is it about national security, not only is it about corporate espionage, not only is it about data security, privacy, all sorts of topics that we can bring to the surface, but at the end of the day, it's about what's being done and who's doing it and how efficiently are they able to do it and how can we optimize and augment them from what they're doing. Because there's lots of this repeatable and redundant tasks that we have. If we can identify opportunities in between those and say, if we don't have AI for today, we will have it in the future. But if we have it in the future, how do we take the AI that we invest in today and have it interoperable with the future AI? There's lots to discuss on those topics, but they're worth discussing because with analysis of business impact, analysis of societal impact, analysis of family and friends life impact, you can do all of that just by using a single small formula, right? And you're able to drive the conversation in the right direction in any group that you're part of. Either you're a lead or you're following the leader in the movement. So strength, SWOT analysis, pastel analysis, any sort of analysis that you want to do, financial justification, financial impact, business impact, you should be able to drive the conversation and you should be able to contribute in the conversations with open mind. And with that, I think this is the end of the presentation here. I hope you've learned as much as you were expecting to learn, and I'm looking forward to taking your questions. We meet weekly, and if you're interested, hit a like, a comment, or give us a message in the inbox. And we're looking forward to answering all the questions in real time, so that way you don't have to feel like you're on this journey alone. And there's so many of us ready and willing to help you in your journey going forward. So until next time, thank you so much for being here, and have a good rest of the week.